perishables are reaching you, I don't know what the condition of those perishables is. So that is also another concern, right? So you might have to sort of improvise in your diet and plug in some prepackaged food products and maybe some fresh. So in that sense, I would suggest you could probably opt for UHT milk, the ones that come in Tetra Pak. Milk is a good source. Probably you'll end up having 6 grams in one serving of 200 ml glass. You could switch to eggs. Eggs again, if you refrigerate them, they should stay put for around 3 weeks. And again, very good sources of complete proteins. They're often considered the benchmark when it comes to protein digestibility score. Um, non-vegetarian sources could be an issue based on the current supply chain disruptions. For example, I can give you an example of Bhutan. So Bhutan relies a lot on import of food products from India. Meat is one of them, and recently we had a ban on meat import from India. So now that the meat is not coming in, the population here would not have access to meat as a source of protein. So in fact, we are advocating with the government on a lot of vegetarian sources of protein. And when it comes to vegetarian sources of protein, often the question comes in of amino acid scoring and how do we ensure that we get all the essential amino acids. So you remember the whole concept of protein complementarity, right? That cereals typically are deficient in lysine, whereas pulses tend to be deficient in methionine and tryptophan and cysteine. So maybe if you do a combination diet of cereals and pulses, you will be able to have most of your um, essential amino acids, right? So it's a whole question of demand and supply when it comes to what is available for you to draw that particular micro or macronutrient. And I would say that you are best placed to take that decision based on whatever is available to you via supermarkets right now, and make the best of what is available by making such combinations maybe. um, in terms of uh, plant-based sources like lentils, beans, you could opt for ones which have a much longer shelf life. And they're not just good sources of proteins, but they're good sources of vitamins and minerals also, right? But stay away from a lot of canned food, maybe, which comes in with a whole lot of salt at times, because then your salt intake goes for a toss. So moving further, I'm moving to the perishables now, fruits and vegetables, which typically are a good source of vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants. Now, in terms of actual requirement of how much we need, WHO recommends that you need around 5 servings a day, which comes to about 400 to 500 grams of fruits and vegetables in a day. But we all know we are not having that. And I'll give you examples from both India as well as Bhutan here. India, there was a phytonutrient survey done. I can't recall which year it was, but if you look up the phytonutrient survey India, you will definitely come across this report. And you'll realize that Indians are not consuming the recommended 5 servings of fruits and vegetables a day. And there are many reasons for it. One, of course, is our whole apprehension around the safety and pesticides and the food safety aspects of it. But otherwise also, we consume about 3 to 3.5 servings as opposed to 5. And students in particular consume even less than that, right? So as I said, students and working professionals, we are kind of working at a very different pace, and sometimes our lifestyles don't allow us to incorporate some of these dietary habits, good dietary habits in our diet. But ideally, we should, because this, of course, gives us that much needed protection against non communicable diseases. It gives us our dietary source of vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants, or phytonutrients, as they say, all kinds of bioactives, right? And I think even in Bhutan, I can share that there was a WHO STEP survey done in 2014. So 67% of Bhutanese do not consume enough fruits and vegetables. Now, one reason here could be that we don't grow as much. So, as I said, Bhutan is primarily dependent on imports from India. A lot of fruits and vegetables come in from there. Here we grow a lot of apples and citrus fruits, but besides that, mostly the vegetables come in from India. Plus, somehow traditionally, culturally, the diets here have been kind of skewed towards carbohydrates and meats of certain kind, but not so much on fruits and vegetables. And I think that pattern or that trend is now going to change as we sensitize the population about benefits of consuming more fruits and vegetables. We all know this, that we are supposed to build a colorful plate, and we know, as food scientists, we study a lot of anthocyanins and carotenoids and flavonoids, and the benefits that all these kind of impart to human health. So you know that there are different sources, and you can pick and choose and integrate these wonderful fruits and vegetables in your daily diet. Now, again, in terms of my plate, something that I had reference to previously, this is very, very recent, and NIN has come up with this recommendation because people are often lost, even people who are. Hello, ma'am, am I audible?
Yeah, Mansi, you're audible.
Okay,
Maybe
okay,
there was some breakage in the voice, but now it's clear.
okay, great. So, in terms of how much should you be eating in a single day, NIN recommends that these different 7 different food groups and how they can be integrated into your daily diet in terms of actual quantities. Cereals about 270 grams a day, pulses 90 grams, and fats and oils 27 grams. So this is very, very simple recommendation from them and how your plate should look like. So you can see that a major chunk of your plate has been devoted to fruits and vegetables. And the next big chunk can be seen as cereals, right? Whereas the other chunks are kind of smaller, fats and oils being the most the smallest of all, and all dairy products and pulses and eggs and flesh foods forming the third largest chunk. It's a very simple, easy to follow for someone who's not too technical, just to integrate this into your daily life, looking at the portion sizes. Now, in terms of energy breakup, NIN again recommends that, we talked about a balanced diet and how carbohydrates should give you around 50 to 60% of your total calories, preferably from complex carbs, 10 to 15% from proteins, and 20 to 30 from your visible fats, both visible and invisible fats. But what they have now recommended, especially in light of COVID, is something like this, where they're saying that cereals should give you around 45% of your daily energy requirement, and fats and oils just about 12%. And they've included fruits, vegetables as well. But this is only their contribution to energy and nothing else. So you have to think of energy and think of this pie chart, maybe, that this is how your energy breakup should look like. I'll recommend a very simple thing to do for you. All of you maybe could just do a 24-hour dietary recall. Just look back at your previous 24 hours and see what all you had consumed in foods. And just by basic rule of thumb calculations, figure out how much of these food groups did you actually consume, both in grams and maybe a rough estimation of percentage delivery to your energy. You'll be surprised for sure. And definitely you'll come low on fruits, vegetables, and even proteins. Now that we've covered basic ingredients, basic food groups, I'll move on to something which is traditional Indian wisdom, something that the Ministry of Ayush is also promoting these days for COVID and management of COVID response as such. We're talking about these wonderful herbs that have some or the other role to play in boosting your immune response, right? Be it anti inflammatory or antioxidant properties, or provision of certain vitamins like amla is a great source of vitamin C. Ginger, which is again anti-inflammatory, antioxidant properties. So is turmeric, anti-inflammatory and antioxidant. And nuts, of course, they're a powerhouse of fats, proteins, fiber, minerals, and vitamins. Now, how you could integrate some of these elements into your daily diet? A lot of tea, infusion based teas, which are non caffeinated teas, have gooseberry or Himalayan gooseberry or amla integrated as part of the infusion. I'm trying something of that sort here. Bhutan also has a lot of traditional medicine, right? Similar to what we have the concept of Ayurveda, they have Bhutanese traditional medicine, and gooseberry happens to form a major chunk of it. Turmeric is something that you can incorporate as part of your daily milk routine. So that gives you your milk contribution, and you can add some turmeric and have your golden milk, as they say, right? A handful of nuts is something that you can have daily, either soaked almonds or walnuts or even flax seeds and all other kind of nuts or seeds that you think could be available to you for now. Ginger is readily available in Indian households. We use it frequently in cooking. You could also have it as ginger honey lemon, as part of tea. That also kind of ups your water intake, right? So you can have ginger and water, you can have gooseberry and water. So that kind of helps you innovate with your water intake also. Besides these superfoods, I have not incorporated two other elements which are also known to boost your immune response. One is probiotic foods, and the other one is omega 3s, right? So when you have your nuts, of course, flax seeds and walnuts offer omega 3 fatty acids to you. So you could integrate those also in your diet and integrate probiotic foods if that is available. If it is not available, the commercial ones are not available, you can have your household curd. That is something that you can use for now. Now, a lot has been talked about micronutrients, fortification, and how they play a role in kind of helping you, strengthen your immune response. Some of these vitamins and minerals are crucial to maintain your immune response and processes. One such vitamin is vitamin A. Often, when we think about immunity, we think about one vitamin, which is vitamin C. Everybody would think about vitamin C in the first instance. Nobody would probably go to a vitamin A, D, and other some of the lesser known minerals, but they are equally important. Now, vitamin A, as we know, it's known as an anti-inflammation vitamin, right? And it plays a role in your cellular immune response. The one that I mentioned was the last one to happen, right? Which is at a very mature stage when your body or your system immune response tends to identify infected cells also and starts to neutralize those cells, right? So vitamin A plays a role there. And vitamin A also helps you maintain your epithelial integrity. Epithelial is to do with skin, right? So whatever entry points you have in your body, like nasal passages or your mouth or your eyes, a lot of these epithelial cell linings are they for their integrity to be maintained. Vitamin A is very, very crucial. So these are some of the sources that you can probably integrate in your diet to ensure that you have enough vitamin A. All of us know that vitamin A doesn't exist as such in food, right? You have the provitamins, which are typically carotenoids. When you consume carotenoids, your body, at a certain conversion efficiency, it converts those provitamins into vitamin A, which is the active form. The active form is called retinol. Some animal products offer retinol as such, which is the preformed version, right? So maybe you can complement your diet with fruits and vegetables that offer you carotenoids, and you can balance it out with some of the dairy products or animal products that give you preformed vitamin A. Coming to the vitamin C, the most popular one, which is known to have antioxidant and wound healing properties, and prevents your cells from oxidative damage. Vitamin C, of course, it supports both your innate, your natural immune system, as well as the acquired one, the adaptive one. And it also, of course, has a role to play in respiratory tract infections, right? Sources are mostly fruits, typically citrus fruits, some of the vegetables like cruciferous family vegetables like cabbage, lettuce. In terms of sensitivity of this vitamin, we know it's a very, very heat sensitive vitamin, right? And tends to get damaged very easily. So your cooking practices have to account for that. And that's why probably consuming fruits in the rawest of their form would be the best in this case. Um, Also, you could, refer to maybe some of these supplements, some of these chewable tablets that are coming in for vitamin C. Vitamin C because it's a water soluble vitamin, your body kind of flushes it out. If you have any inhibitions about or doubts about toxicity, please have a look at a document which is from the US Institute of Medicine. It's called the Tolerable Upper Limits, TUL. So, in case, because you're an informed audience, you're food technologists yourself and scientists yourself, I would recommend that you look this up. One reference document could be your ICMR and recommendations on how much you should take in for a day, which is your RDA, recommended dietary allowance. The other document that you should look at is the US Institute of Medicine's tolerable upper limits, so that you know how much you're supposed to take in and what level is the maximum level from all sources, so that you don't end up having any toxicity. But having said that, naturally, whatever is coming in from foods, you know that there are a lot of anti-nutritional factors, etc. So the bioavailability is often compromised. It's not 100%, right? So you'd never get in exactly what is there. Plus, the levels are very low in natural food products. And if you're topping it up with some of these supplements, the supplements often tell you what percentage of RDA you're getting in per tablet, right? So you can always look at that information and take an informed decision as to how much you should take in a day. The other one is vitamin E, again known to have antioxidant properties and therefore has a role to play in promoting healthy immune system. A lot of the mechanisms are still very unclear. You know, it's ongoing research and people are still trying to understand how exactly these vitamins support the immune system. But broadly, we know as a rule of thumb, a lot of these vitamins do have a role to play. So vitamin E again is available through edible vegetable oils and some of the cereal germs, some leafy green vegetables and nuts, of course. Vitamin D, the sunshine vitamin, another vitamin which I think would be most of us would be deficient. You know, in fact, all of us consider that we are all under lockdown and mostly indoors. We are not getting enough sunshine or exposure to light. That is what is required to trigger the synthesis of vitamin D, right? And now that we're not going out, I think it merits to have adequate intake either via food, which again is kind of limited because only oily fish or some fortified products might have this. So therefore, it's very, very important to have this via supplements, right? Vitamin D, typically we know it for bone health and its role in calcium absorption. But more research is throwing light on its role on immunity and also on respiratory tract infections and your ability to fight those. So maybe this is something that you should definitely consider to take in via supplements, right? B12, another tricky vitamin. I'll give you an example of what was happening here in Bhutan a couple of years back. Many children, they kind of shifted their dietary patterns from non-vegetarian to vegetarian sources, right? For whatever reasons. And after that, we started seeing a lot of um, uh, manifestation of something called as peripheral neuropathy. We started seeing manifestations of glossitis in school-going children. And what we figured out was that mostly the children were deficient in vitamin B12 and B1, thiamine. So thiamine typically we relate it with beriberi and beriberi as one of the symptoms of beriberi, you have peripheral neuropathy, which is like numbing of your extremities, right? Your limbs would go numb. And B12 was also one of the deficient vitamin in those children. So we realized that if you completely shift from an animal-based diet to a plant-based diet, you will probably end up with a B12 deficiency. So alongside vitamin D, I would suggest that this is also something that you should consider based on your dietary patterns to include in your diet via supplements or other means. Unless if your diet is very diversified, you will most likely have a deficiency. And this is again required for proper red blood cell formation, nerve system functioning. It has a role in cellular immunity. It modulates immune response primarily. So this is something that you can take into account. Now, if I were to sum it all up for immunity micronutrients, right? You've read about vitamin A, C, E, typically called out as ACE, the sunshine vitamin D, B vitamins, and minerals like iron, zinc, selenium, and copper, the lesser known trace minerals as well. They all have a role in immunity. And how exactly do they help your immune response? They enhance both your native and adaptive immune function, and they prevent infection. They regulate your immune function, they keep inflammation under control, they prevent tissue damage as well. As I said, the adaptive immune response has a memory, right? So that if at all you encounter the same foreign invader, your reinfection would have a much smaller trajectory, or immune response would be much more faster, right? And some of these vitamins help your body to remember that. Then they also scavenge some of the toxins which are produced in large quantities in the body during infection and immune response. There are some secondary metabolites formed in that whole process when your foreign invader is being neutralized, right? So a lot of these vitamins are involved in scavenging it all out. Then some of them are required by your beneficial bacteria in the gut and the intestine, which regulates your gut microflora, right? And maintains your intestinal integrity, reduces the transmission of toxins from intestine to blood. So you can imagine that they are required in minute quantities, but they play a massive role in how your immune system functions and how your immune system responds to an antigen. Now, in the same topic, I would like to focus on this aspect. Of course, dietary diversification is something which helps you get all your vitamins, minerals, antioxidants from your daily consumed diet. It's a long term strategy, of course, but given the current scenario, you may not have access to, as I said, all kinds of food, which may be because of market disruptions, supply chain disruptions, or losses happening across the value chain, and the commodity is not reaching you on time, right? In that case, if you have poor quality or limited quantity of diet, then it's always best to sort of supplement it and just fix up the missing pieces. And how can you do that? You can do that by having fortified staples. Now, a lot of staples, at least in India now, the regulatory authority allows fortification of five staples, right? Wheat flour, rice, salt, milk, and edible oil. So you can choose fortified staples instead of the non fortified ones, so that you ensure that some part of your daily requirements are being met. Now, as per the current FSSAI standards, most of these fortified staples, they cater to about 30 to 60% of your RDA, not more than that, assuming that you will be consuming other food items as well, right? So not more than 30 to 60%. So you can definitely look at their labels and plan your diet in such a way that it doesn't kind of lead to any toxicity. Secondly, you could look at some health food drinks or supplements, and I've just put these commercial products as examples. This is not an endorsement of these products, but it's just to indicate that such products are available in the market and you can pick them up. Of course, some of you might require a doctor's prescription in case you have any ongoing medication or any medical condition, or any food allergies or intolerances. So please be mindful of that before you incorporate any of these suggestions into your daily diet. The last, as I said, is nutraceuticals. This is again something which helps you plug in those gaps, especially if your diets are limited in quality and quantity, which could be the case with the current lockdown scenario at times. Now that we've talked about what to have, we'll move our focus to what to avoid or what to limit. And I know that it sounds good, but it's very difficult to implement. And maybe at times we need to indulge ourselves in foods which are high in fat, sugar, and salt. But I have a suggestion to you which can work out practically. I believe that as a nutrition or a food scientist, somebody who understands the science behind it, if 80% of your day is made up of the need foods, the need foods are the ones that your body actually needs, then you can still kind of play around with that remaining 20% with want foods, the ones that you want to have. And nutrition is all about moderation. So I think you are the best judge. You know what you've had today and you know how to balance it out, be it in terms of burning those calories or reducing or managing your intake so that, rest of the day can be more about healthier options and less about these options, right? The indulging options. So, as you know, this term has become quite famous in India, especially with the new regulation that was under draft stage when I left last year. We were talking about traffic lighting on labels, and that there'll be red, green, yellow, or maybe just red dots to indicate that the food product is high in fat, sugar, and salt. So as we know that some of these products, of course, they contribute a lot towards our daily intake of salt and sugar is known as negative nutrients, or potential risk factors, I would say, for non-communicable diseases. It's best to kind of limit their intake. But as of today, a lot of these food products and their labels do not give you enough information so that you can make a choice, an informed choice based on that information. Now, going forward, as and when probably India adopts that regulation, you would have something on the labels to tell you how much is there and whether you should have it or not. And if you have it, then how do you balance your rest of the intake for the day? Now, WHO has recommendations on how much sugar you should consume as adults, both from NCD perspective, dental caries perspective, and overall health perspective. So they cap your overall sugar intake by saying that not more than 10% of your total energy intake for the day should come from sugars. So imagine if you are supposed to take around 2000 calories in a day, not more than 10% should come from sugars. That is hardly 200 kcal, which, if you do the calculations, it comes to around 50 grams of sugar. And that sugar can be hidden sugar or sucrose, something that you're topping up as table sugar. So you have to be cognizant of that. And WHO further suggests a reduction to 5% of total intake. That's only 6 teaspoons in a day, if you were to sort of maintain your diet and avoid any NCDs in future, and also the risk of dental caries. On salt, WHO caps it to around 5 grams a day. Imagine, while we were doing some behavior change communication strategy for Bhutan and how people can change their dietary choices and behaviors here, we got to know via a study that here the salt consumption is 9 grams what is recommended by WHO. So, a lot of times we're not even aware of how much salt we are consuming directly or indirectly through our food items. So it's best that you try and read your labels, food labels for that, as and when that information is presented to you. Now that we've looked at both the negative nutrients and the positive nutrients, we come to a concept called food safety, of course. They say that it's not food if it's not safe, right? The last thing you want is that in addition to your regular infections, you end up having a foodborne infection, right? That's the last thing we want. So we want our food to be safe. And again, these are some of the five the keys that WHO recommends around safe food handling, that you have to keep your hands clean. In any case, hand hygiene and respiratory hygiene has gotten a lot of focus now in the wake of COVID. So now all of us know that 20-second hand wash regimen and how to go about cleaning our hands, how to disinfect, and separate raw and cooked food. Of course, that's something that we know to avoid cross contamination. Cook food thoroughly, and if it is supposed to be stored, the chilled foods have, or the ones that are supposed to be stored cold, have to be below 5 degrees. The one that have to be served hot have to be above 60. So that danger zone is between 5 to 60, right? And if you have any cooked food or leftovers, you shouldn't leave it out for more than 2 hours. So all of that information is known to us, that we have to store at safe temperatures. And lastly, a lot of fresh produce and how to go about cleaning fresh produce. I see a lot of questions and queries coming in, and a lot of especially people who are in the food service sector, food retail sector, they are kind of struggling with that as to how to ensure that food doesn't become a carrier for COVID. Now, you know that food, as of today, there is no evidence to say that food is transmitting COVID, right? So food is not the carrier or the source. But if there are, of course, data points to say that the virus stays on so and so surface for X minutes or X hours, people are kind of panicking and they want to know how to ensure safety of fresh produce, especially. So you would have access to FSSAI and their website. They've come up with very simple, easy to follow key messages on how you should ensure food safety in the times of COVID, both for food businesses, retailers, and for consumers as well, and how to go about washing your fruits and vegetables. I think they recommend around 50 ppm of chlorine, active chlorine, for fruits and vegetables to be washed. But I would, strongly recommend that you go through FSSAI website and look for all their guidance material on how to ensure food safety during this time. I think I'm at the end of my presentation, and before we sort of disperse and move on to either a Q&A round, I would just request all of you to participate in this challenge, which is called United We Eat Challenge, because it's best to practice what you've learned, right? So, in terms of the challenge, what exactly you're supposed to do, make a balanced meal. And I'm sure all of you are on social media, all the students, either Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. You have to mention either the ingredient list, nutritional value, or recipe for your meal, and then encourage three more people, three of your friends or colleagues, to share their own stories. You can tag us at the World Food Program on Facebook and Instagram, and at WFP on Twitter, and use these hashtags. I hope to see many of Amity students after this lecture kind of participating in this challenge. It's all about practicing what we've learned today, and it's not even something which is new information. We all are kind of aware of all these basics. It's the implementation where we lack. So I would recommend that all of you go out there, maybe use a weekend and prepare this balanced meal. And don't restrict this information to yourself. Please pass it on. I think this information is something which is generic, it's useful for people. It can be passed on to your communities and your friends to say that, this is how you can take care of yourself while we struggle with this unprecedented situation, right? Lastly, I'll leave you with some additional references and resources that you can learn. You can probably, visit at your leisure and learn more about nutrition and immunity. A lot of this content is being generated across the board, and WFP is also one of the agencies that is, bringing out a lot of material on nutrition and how you can use nutrition to help your immune system fight off infections in general. So that's it from my end. Over to you.
Thanks, Mansi, for a very nice and informative presentation. The topic is really the need of hour, and you have presented very well. The session is open for question answers actually. So we have to wait for 1 or 2 minutes. They'll be writing the questions, the participants. Then,
Sure.
okay.
Yes, Madam Mansi. Oh, disconnect. Hello.
So I can hear you.
Yeah, please. Yeah. Just I want to know, see, in Bhutan, buckwheat is the one cereal or millet. I do not know exactly where it is classified. So, do the Bhutanese they eat in regular diet?
So I can share a broad overview of what is happening here when it comes to cereal intake. So as I said, rice is their staple. Approximately the per capita consumption for rice is around 400 to 500 grams. So that is what is mostly consumed here. But in pockets, they consume other cereals as well. For example, there are parts of East Bhutan which consume a lot of maize. They call it kharang, and that is like corn grits. So a lot of corn is also consumed in the eastern parts. Some communities also consume buckwheat, but it's not as rampantly consumed as wheat, as rice, sorry, and also wheat flour. Wheat flour is also consumed in limited pockets only, especially the areas which are closer to India border, the southern parts. There, I think the dietary habits have kind of, been influenced from Indian consumption patterns also. But otherwise, rice is the main staple. What they make out of buckwheat are small pancakes, and they would usually have it as a snack item. But it's not one of the core staples. I would say the core staples would still be a rice, followed by corn. And now the government is also trying to have quinoa grown here, which is almost like another super cereal, and which is known to come from the Andes mountain. And we know that it wasn't really a native here, but they've found that certain varieties of quinoa have adapted well to the agroclimatic zones of Bhutan. So they've started to grow quinoa as well. Yeah.
Okay. So, but agriculturally, I think buckwheat is produced there or grown there very well.
Yes, yes. And they are kind of self-sufficient in buckwheat. They almost grow 99% of what is consumed in Bhutan. But rice, they are only, probably less than 50% self-sufficient. So a lot of rice is getting imported from India, in fact.
Thank you. Any questions, please,
Hello,
from
Mansi.
discussion?
Hello, Mansi.
Hello.
Hello,
Right.
yes, very nice presentation indeed. I just wanted to know how UN, food program is helping there. I mean, on ground.
Sure. I'm glad you asked that question. I should have brought it up right during the initial parts of my presentation. But so we are looking at a couple of aspects here. One is, as I said, the school feeding program. Now, the school feeding program is nowadays run by the government. Initially, WFP was running the whole program, but since the last year, the Royal Government of Bhutan has taken complete ownership of the school feeding program. Within that program, we are integrating aspects of nutrition and health education also, right? So when it comes to nutrition, we are supplying fortified rice to school children and fortified oil. And also we are advocating on healthy dietary behaviors and dietary habits. So these two components are what we are taking care of in the school feeding program. Now the fortified rice is currently having around 8 micronutrients, six vitamins and 2 minerals, and the oil is fortified with A and D. So that takes care of the children's requirements. And as I said, rice is being consumed as a major staple, right? So all 3 meals, rice is a part: breakfast, lunch, dinner. So you can imagine that it becomes a natural choice for us to fortify that because it's consumed in such high quantities. Now, going back to the other aspect, which is around agriculture, we are promoting nutrition sensitive agriculture with the government so that they kind of grow crops that are nutritionally more rich, and then those nutritious crops should be ideally linked to institutions like schools, right? So farmers also get kind of the right price for their produce, and their produce gets an assured market with institutions like hospitals and schools. So we are helping them link the farmers with the institutions, and so that the nutritious crops can have these supply chains and ready-made or assured markets. So these are two areas of work where we are integrating nutrition. And now, because of the COVID emergency, the government is trying to build up, buffer stocks. It's like an emergency reserve of food for the population. At least half a population can be covered by this emergency reserve for about 6 months. It's, you can imagine something similar what we have as public distribution system, right? But that PDS is more like an entitlement by the law. Here, there is a National Food Security Reserve, which is now being planned by the government in response to COVID, because they know that the supply chains might get disrupted. India is under a lockdown situation. There might be issues in transporting food. The rice mills may not be working in India because of labor shortages, etc. So a lot of the supplies, imports from India to Bhutan would be kind of cut off. with that in mind, the government has tried to create this buffer stock. So, in fact, I'm also supporting them on the food safety and quality aspects of all these government food stocks that they are trying to bring in from India.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Mansi, I have also one question. Selenium is a very important micronutrient. So, is it safe
Right.
to take selenium every day?
Yes, in fact, we have, unfortunately, we don't have RDAs for some of these trace metals, but we do have tolerable upper limits, definitely. So you can refer to those tolerable upper limits, and also some of these trace metals can be taken in from your cereal intake itself. So you probably don't need to have supplements to top up that intake. And within the range that we consume, typically 270 to 300 grams of carbohydrates, the selenium intake should be sufficing for the day. It shouldn't be sort of toxic to your system.
Okay. Okay. Because nowadays everybody is focusing on selenium-rich foods and then selenium-rich nutraceuticals.
Selenium, yes, it is being added in a lot of these nutraceuticals as well. Yes. But rest assured, most of the nutraceuticals kind of, not all of them, but some of them would have 100% RDA delivered through one tablet, one dose.
Okay.
But I would suggest that, if you're taking any kind of supplement, try and restrict yourself to 30% or 50% of your RDA so that you know that, rest of it can be managed through the diet and there are no chances of you going overboard, beyond the recommended intake. In any case, all of these supplements, they have a safety buffer inbuilt. None of them would go beyond a certain RDA and definitely not beyond the tolerable upper intake. So you are kind of within safe limits when you're
Safe
consuming all
limits.
of these.
Within safe limits. Yeah.
Hello, Mansi. Can you elaborate the role of vitamin D in immunity?
Sure, ma'am. So as I said, some of these vitamins, they play a role, but exactly the pathway or the mechanism in which that happens, that has not been elaborated. So a lot of this is evolving science. Vitamin D, so far, a lot of data has been generated around its role in bone health, right, and calcium absorption, but lesser known
Yes.
evidence is available for immunity. But having said that, as of today, we can definitely say it has a role to play in both innate and acquired immunity. How exactly that happens, that pathway is still not elaborated upon. Maybe it has a role in the immune cells, right, and ensuring that their receptors are kind of primed. The receptors are primed to react with the antigen, for example. Typically, for vitamins, that's the first kind of role that they play in immune strengthening.
Ma'am, I
Okay,
wanted to
thank you.
ask. Hello,
Yes.
Yeah,
ma'am. Should I ask one question?
sure.
Ma'am, if these foods, vitamin A and vitamin C rich foods, have these pesticide residues to protect the crops, and they are toxic to humans, and they decreases the immune system of our bodies. So, should we only consider the natural sources, or should we consider the supplements and the nutraceuticals?
Interesting question. Of course, as I said, in typically in India, we do stay away from a lot of fresh produce because of the fear of pesticides and any kind of um, artificial ripening agents or hormones as well, artificial hormones being injected for growth. Um, I would recommend that go and use fresh produce from trusted sources. I know everybody cannot get into the whole organic category, but of course, if you can, do prefer organic. Otherwise, you can go with trusted sources of fruits and vegetables. Having said that, the regulator does have prescribed maximum residue limits, right? FSSAI does have MRLs for products. But because a lot of these fresh produce do not fall under the purview of the regulator, because they are primary produce, then it becomes an issue in terms of regulating it, right? FSSAI can maybe regulate a product which is value added, like a jam or a preserve or maybe a chutney, which has been made out of these fresh fruits and vegetables, but they cannot probably regulate fresh produce itself, right? Because it classifies it as primary produce. Having said that, we do have MRLs, we do have agriculture extension services in the country which train farmers to use pesticides in a regulated manner and only the approved ones. But I get your concern that, often we see a lot of contaminants being carried forward from primary production level into our plates. Um, in that sense, I would suggest, as I said, go with organic or try and go with trusted sources. Otherwise, if you're really, really, concerned about potential contaminants getting into your diet, then you can team it up with some supplements and some fortified staples as well.
Thank you, ma'am.
Hello. Good evening, ma'am. Hello.
Good evening.
Ma'am, very nice presentation. I loved it. Ma'am, I had a very simple question on vitamin C. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
like, ma'am, there's a common practice of having honey lemon water in the morning, early morning.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
ma'am, do you think that the vitamin C content, like, it is heat sensitive, right? So, if you're having it in warm water or hot water, so doesn't the vitamin C content, decreases of the lemon?
Right. So, of course, all these heat sensitive and light sensitive vitamins, they have a certain threshold, right? I mean, it's not as if 100% degradation would happen in one go. Also depends on the temperature of your water, whether it's lukewarm or it's really, really 60, 70 plus Celsius upwards, right? So you would see some amount of loss, but it's not 100% loss. And that's also true for fortified staples, for example. So if I say I'm consuming fortified milk or fortified oil, for example, and I'm using that oil for frying, right? And deep frying would, of course, have very, very high temperatures. And in that sense, you would see some amount of losses there. Now, when it comes to natural foods, you cannot do anything about it. There will be some loss, and that is something that you have to live with. With fortified staples, what we do is we typically have a concept called overages, and we compensate for these process losses, we compensate for storage losses by adding some additional quantities of vitamins at the time of processing. So whatever you are saying on the label, for example, if your oil manufacturer on the label declares that I have 150 micrograms of vitamin A per 100 grams of oil, the quantity, actual quantity would be slightly higher because the manufacturer has to account for all these potential losses that happen along storage, cooking, right? So I would suggest that when it comes to natural sources, it's okay. I mean, one-off loss would happen, and it's okay, but it won't be like 100% loss or degradation. And for fortified commodities, you have some buffer built in as overages to account for that loss.
Thank you, ma'am.
Any more question, please?
So I think there'll be no questions now because they're not displayed on the chat box.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Madam Amity. It was a very interesting talk, and it is a full of knowledge only. That it is our related to our day-to-day life, and especially I like that in during this period we need 80% food nutrition as per this, but and we want 20. But nowadays it is a reverse.
Right.
So we need 80 and 20 want, but in general life also it is always we doesn't match our nutrition requirement with the body requirement.
Right, sir.
That is a big problem
Lucky,
with our food habits.
right, sir. Luckily, I think with my exposure here in Bhutan, I'm getting to see a lot of organic food products and small time food companies which are making cold pressed juices and very interesting new food products. So anytime any of your students is visiting here, as and when the situation kind of normalizes, do plan to visit, and I'll be here and let's connect, and I can show you about the cultural practices here and the dietary patterns here. It's quite an interesting mix.
So there is one more question. Because somebody has typed, there is some problem with their mic. How are the dietary guidelines modified for an individual who is moderately active during pandemic? Also, does the use of heavy varieties be effective in the current situation? Mansi.
Okay, then, yeah, right. So, moderate activity, sedentary, and heavy workers, all these three criteria or categories are well illustrated in the National Institute of Nutrition's RDA guidelines. So, that's another document that I would recommend all students to look up. That is the NIN RDA, which is for the year 2010. So you'll see that your caloric intake has been spelled out exactly based on your levels of activity. Of course, nowadays you can't sort of measure how much exactly you're taking in unless you have provisions of maybe a weighing scale at home, and if you're gaining weight, you know what the trend is for yourself under lockdown. If you're tracking your weight, you would know what is happening with you, right? Then you have to balance it out by reducing your intake of calories at least. So I would suggest keep a track of your weight in the first place. That is number one. Number two, look at your activity levels. If you think you're not active enough, at least have 60 minutes of physical activity, right? Which could be moderate also, not necessarily heavy, but just moderate activity. And then look at your trend, of course. And as I said, another tool is your 24 hours dietary recall. Just look back at your last 24 hours, see what kind of foods you've been having. You would also get a sense of, typical quantities. I know not all of us kind of measure and weigh what we are eating. We don't do that. I mean, that kind of takes away the whole fun of eating, right? For us, eating is also a source of pleasure. It's so much, it has socio-cultural aspects to it. It cannot be all science and mathematics that you can't keep on counting calories. But just do a very, very broad reflection on what you've had in the last 24 hours. And as I said, track your weight during this time. With all of us working from home here in Bhutan, I am kind of struggling with the same challenges as you people are. And in a way, I'm kind of reliving the Indian lockdown, here. So I'm with you, totally understand. Just try following some of these practical tips of tracking your weight and looking at your 24 hours dietary recall.
Yeah, if any more, if no question is there,
One
then
more question. There is one more question, Dr. Monica. Monica, ma'am, there is one
Okay,
more
ma'am.
question from Prerna.
Ma'am, you please ask because the questions are not displayed in my chat box.
Prerna Pant is asking, is there any job opportunity in WFP?
Okay. So, not as of now, but we do have our corporate website, and we regularly keep on posting job announcements. And this is like my home, because I've worked here for like 5 years. I was with WFP India, and I worked on fortification programs in India as well. And this is my second stint with the organization. So, of course, it's a wonderful organization to work for. Do look up the corporate website, and you will be able to find out if there's a vacancy or not. Otherwise, stay connected. Karuna ma'am and Monica ma'am have my details. If any of you want to reach out to me for anything, just casual discussion